Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today we're going to tackle kind of a tough one, a question that, frankly, has haunted humanity since, like, forever.
Right.
Why is there suffering in the world? I mean, you got to think everyone's wondered this at some point.
Yeah, that's a universal experience for sure. I mean, throughout history and across all cultures,
Yeah.
people have always asked that question.
And that's exactly what we are going to try and at least explore today. We're diving into a sermon.
Okay.
It's called Gothenburg Asks God 5. Why do you allow suffering?
Okay.
Now, what makes it so fascinating is that this sermon is a direct response to, like, real questions
Interesting.
that people asked in Gothenburg.
Wow.
They actually held conversations for 3 days, gathering all these deep personal concerns.
So it's coming from like a real place.
Yeah.
Real people's questions.
This is not some, ivory tower theological exercise.
Yeah.
This is grounded in real people's lived experiences.
I like it.
So get ready, because the sermon doesn't shy away from the tough stuff at all. It dives headfirst into the reality of suffering, explores the possibility that maybe suffering serves a purpose,
Okay.
and even offers like practical guidance for navigating those like really difficult times.
I'm interested.
But before we unpack all of that, I want to hear from you a little bit about this. How have different cultures and philosophies approached the question of suffering throughout history?
Well, that's a great question to start with. Because you're right, suffering has been this catalyst for so much philosophical and theological inquiry. Going way back, like ancient Greece, the Stoic philosophers,
Right.
they thought the key to finding inner peace was accepting suffering as just this inevitable part of life.
Okay.
On the other hand, Buddhist thought. They linked suffering to attachment and desire, suggesting that if we can detach ourselves from those worldly cravings, we can achieve enlightenment and liberation.
So different perspectives, but kind of a shared recognition that suffering is just part of the deal.
Woven into the very fabric of human existence.
Yeah. And it's not just these ancient philosophies.
Yeah.
The 20th century writer C.S. Lewis, for example, he wrestled with the problem of suffering a lot. He was a Christian apologist. But a lot of his insights even resonate with people outside the faith. He argued that suffering is just this unavoidable consequence of living in a world where we have free will.
Makes sense.
He even had this really powerful metaphor.
Oh.
He said that God uses pain as a megaphone
Oh, hi.
to rouse a deaf world.
Wow.
Yeah, a megaphone to rouse a deaf world.
I like that. That's powerful imagery.
It is. But I think I see what he's getting at. Suffering can definitely jolt us awake sometimes, makes us question, everything we thought we knew,
Right.
and forces us to confront some of those big questions of life.
Like, what are we doing here? What's it all about,
Yeah.
Shakes you out of your complacency and forces you to really confront
Yeah.
our vulnerability, our need for something bigger than ourselves.
That seems to be a key theme in the sermon that we're going to be looking at. It starts by addressing this question head on. Where is God in your pain and suffering? No sugarcoating there.
Straight to it.
Yeah.
And I think, people need that when they're in pain. People want honesty. They want authenticity.
Yeah, they don't want like platitudes.
Yeah.
And this sermon starts off by acknowledging something I think we all know to be true.
Yeah.
Suffering is just part of life.
It is.
There's this line in John 16 where Jesus himself says, "Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows." It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. There's a stark realism there.
It is.
It
Yes.
acknowledges the inevitability,
Yeah.
even if you're a person of faith.
It does. But here's what's really interesting. The sermon doesn't stop there.
What does it say?
It goes on to say the second part of that verse,
Okay.
where Jesus adds, "But take heart because I have overcome the world."
Yeah.
So it's like he's acknowledging, okay, it's going to be hard,
Right.
but there's also this glimmer of hope. There's something more.
Like even in the midst of suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That inherent tension,
Totally. That's life, right? Or that tension, the reality of suffering,
Yeah.
alongside this yearning for meaning and hope.
So have you ever felt that?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I think we all have those moments, right? Where you're like, why is this happening?
Right.
And it's like you question everything and, pain and doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just cloud your vision.
But even that smallest glimmer
Yeah.
can be like a lifeline in those moments.
100%.
Okay. I think that's a perfect place to move into the next section of this sermon, because it shifts from acknowledging the reality of suffering to exploring this idea
Okay.
that suffering might actually have a purpose.
No, this is where it gets interesting.
It is. The sermon doesn't shy away from this question. that I know a lot of people wrestle with.
Yeah.
If God is good, why is there suffering? And here's where it gets really interesting. The pastor brings in this quote from Romans 8. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Now, I know that verse is often debated,
Yeah.
even within Christian circles.
Yeah.
So how do people interpret that?
Well, some see it as this universal promise,
Okay.
implying that everything, even the bad stuff, ultimately leads to something good in everybody's life. Others interpret it more narrowly,
Yeah.
only applying to people who have a personal relationship with God.
Okay, so that's a key distinction.
Mhm.
What constitutes good in that context?
Right.
Yeah.
Is it material prosperity, emotional well-being, or is it something deeper, spiritual growth,
Mhm.
developing virtues like compassion and empathy?
Right. The sermon seems to lean towards that second one,
Okay,
suggesting that suffering can actually be this catalyst for growth and transformation.
I can see that.
And it even uses examples from the Bible,
Mhm.
figures like Moses, Elijah, Queen Esther,
Mm,
even Jesus' own disciples.
right. So they all went through tough stuff.
Immense hardship.
Hmm.
But those experiences shaped them
Right.
and really contributed to their purpose.
It's interesting how the sermon uses those figures.
Yeah.
But the thing that I find even more interesting
Right.
is that this whole concept that suffering can actually be transformative.
Yeah.
It's not just a Christian idea.
Oh.
You see this throughout lots of different spiritual traditions and philosophies.
Oh, really? Give me some examples.
Absolutely. Like, have you ever heard of the Japanese art of kintsugi?
Kintsugi.
Yeah, it's this beautiful practice where they repair broken pottery with gold.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they highlight the cracks and imperfections instead of trying to hide them.
So like those broken places become part of the story.
Exactly. They make the object even more unique,
Yeah.
more valuable,
Yeah.
because of what it's been through.
That's beautiful.
And it reflects this understanding in Japanese culture
Yeah.
that hardship and adversity, it can actually lead to beauty and resilience.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So the sermon acknowledges the reality of suffering,
Mm-hmm.
hints at the idea that it might have a purpose,
Yeah.
but then it takes it one step further
Okay.
and it outlines 4 principles
Okay.
for actually walking through those tough times.
I like that.
It provides this framework
Yeah.
for navigating suffering.
It's like a guide
Yeah.
for people who are struggling
Yeah,
in pain.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're going to dive into next time.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back to our deep dive. We're talking about why suffering exists. And right before we got into the whole kintsugi thing,
Right. Yeah.
we were talking about bringing our pain to God, that first principle for walking through suffering.
Yes. Acknowledging it. Seeking comfort and guidance
Right.
from a higher power.
Yeah.
But what does that actually look like?
Yeah.
I mean, is it formal prayer? Is it quiet contemplation? Or is it something totally different?
That's a great question because it really can manifest in so many different ways.
Yeah.
What works for one person might not for another.
Right.
So for some, it might be pouring out their heart in prayer, expressing their raw emotions, seeking solace
Yeah.
in that divine presence. Others might find moments of stillness
Yeah.
and reflection, just allowing themselves to be present with their pain.
So it's really about finding a way to connect
Exactly.
with something larger than ourselves, whether it's through, organized religion
Yeah.
or something more personal.
It's about that authenticity, not performing, not pretending,
Yeah.
just being real with ourselves, with whatever higher power we believe in.
Right. Recognizing our vulnerability, letting ourselves be seen in our brokenness.
And you know what? I think that's a really liberating thing,
It is.
to bring our suffering to God.
Yeah.
Because it allows us to release that burden of carrying it alone
Yeah.
and opens us up to the possibility of healing and transformation.
Okay, but the sermon gives us more than that, right? It doesn't just stop there.
It is.
It offers 3 more principles to help us, navigate those stormy seas.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, the second one emphasizes the importance of support, during those hard times.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that we're not meant to go through those things alone.
So principle number 2, fill your life with God's word and God's people. It seems to highlight 2 distinct but interconnected sources of support.
Yeah.
Let's start with God's word. What's the sermon say about that?
It highlights passages from the Psalms, specifically Psalm 119 and Psalm 34, which talk about the sweetness and joy found in God's word. And it also quotes Jeremiah 15, where the prophet says, "When I discovered your words, I devoured them. They are my joy and my heart's delight."
Wow. It's like finding food in a desert.
Right. It's that sustenance,
Yeah.
nourishment
Yeah.
in the midst of like hardship and barrenness.
And it's not just reading words on a page. It's like letting those words speak to us, nourish our souls, remind us that we're not alone.
Exactly. And I think it's important to note here that this principle can apply even for people who aren't necessarily religious.
Okay.
You know, the idea of finding solace in something bigger than ourselves. It can be immersing ourselves in literature, poetry, music.
Yeah. Anything that speaks to us.
Exactly. That feeds our soul.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But the second part of this principle is God's people. So what role does community play?
It's huge. It's about that human connection.
Yeah.
Surrounding ourselves with people who love us,
Yeah.
support us, encourage us, knowing we don't have to carry our burdens alone.
It's like a lifeline when you're drowning.
Exactly. And this resonates so deeply with, you know, what we know about psychology,
Yeah.
about well-being. Social support is crucial for resilience, especially during times of stress.
Right.
So having that strong network, friends, family, a faith community, can give us this sense of belonging, of purpose,
Yeah.
even in the face of tough challenges.
Because when we're isolated,
Yeah,
our pain just gets bigger.
100%. But when we're surrounded by people who care, who listen, who just let us be ourselves, we can handle things better.
Yeah. And it's not just about receiving support, it's about giving it.
Absolutely. Connecting with others, going through similar things. We can share our burdens, encourage each other,
Yeah.
remind each other that we're not alone.
It's like creating a web
It is.
of support.
Yeah.
And that's where that third principle comes in.
Yeah, it shifts the focus
Okay.
from external support to this internal shift.
Okay. I like it. What's principle number 3?
Don't be filled with worry. Overflow with worship. So it's about choosing gratitude,
I love that.
choosing praise.
Even when it's tough.
Even when it's tough.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even when we feel overwhelmed, we still have a choice.
Right.
We can dwell in that fear and worry. Or we can focus on what we're grateful for. Find those moments of joy and beauty, even in the midst of pain.
Exactly. And this aligns with a lot of research in positive psychology and mindfulness.
It does.
Cultivating gratitude, being kind,
Yeah.
focusing on the present moment.
Yeah,
It can really change things, even when things are hard.
it can.
So it's not about pretending everything's okay. It's recognizing that even when things are tough, there are still things to be thankful for.
Yeah.
Moments of beauty, opportunities to connect, to experience joy.
Exactly. And the sermon uses a powerful example to illustrate this point. The story of Paul and Silas.
Okay.
They were imprisoned for their faith, beaten, chained, thrown in a dungeon.
It sounds rough.
It was. But instead of giving in to despair, you know what they did?
What?
They chose to sing hymns.
Wow. That's next level resilience.
It is. It really
I could barely sing in the shower.
Right. But it's a testament to the human spirit,
Yeah.
our ability to find hope and strength even when things are really dark.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that even when things are oppressive on the outside,
Yeah.
we still have that power to choose what's going on inside.
I like it.
Yeah.
So we've talked about bringing our suffering to God, finding strength in His Word and in our community, choosing worship over worry.
Yeah.
That brings us to the fourth and final principle.
All right.
And this one really seems to get at the heart of the Christian perspective on suffering.
This one offers a glimpse into the transformative power of pain
Okay.
and the possibility of finding joy even in the midst of sorrow.
All right. I'm ready. Hit me with principle number 4.
Believe that God will turn your sorrow into great joy.
Whoa. That's a big statement. So even the most painful things can eventually lead to something beautiful.
It's the paradox of faith,
Yeah.
where suffering and joy are intertwined.
And the sermon highlights that ultimate example of this paradox.
Yeah.
Jesus, His suffering, His death, leading to the redemption of humanity.
Talk about finding purpose in pain.
That's all right.
And it's not just a theological concept. It's something that people experience all the time.
Right.
You know, in psychology, there's this thing called post-traumatic growth, where people find meaning and strength and positive change as a result of their struggles.
That is so hopeful.
It really is.
And the sermon even quotes 2 Corinthians 1,
Yeah.
where it talks about comforting others with the comfort we ourselves have received.
Right. So our own pain
Yeah.
can actually help us empathize,
Yes.
understand others.
And it just creates this cycle of healing
It does.
and compassion.
Absolutely. Our experiences, even the hard ones, can equip us
Yeah.
to support and encourage others going through similar things.
Okay, so these 4 principles, they give us a way to deal with suffering, bring it to God, Find strength in his word, in community. Choose worship over worry. And believe that even sorrow can lead to joy. It's a lot, but I'm feeling oddly optimistic right now.
That's good.
And the sermon really emphasizes that even though suffering is just part of life,
Yeah.
doesn't have the final say.
Right. There's that hope
Yeah,
running through the whole thing.
life is hard, but you're not alone, and there's a purpose to your pain.
Yeah. And that purpose may not always be clear right away, but trusting in something bigger than ourselves, drawing strength from that community, choosing gratitude can help us get through those tough times and come out stronger on the other side.
That's really powerful. And speaking of powerful messages, the sermon ends with a message of hope. It even quotes Tim Keller, who talks about finding consolation in Christian doctrines, especially the idea of resurrection and a future without suffering. So we were talking about finding hope when things are tough and how those experiences can help us grow. And this sermon ends with a powerful image of the future. That longing for peace and healing.
Right.
It actually draws from Revelation 21, where it says that God will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore.
Wow.
That's powerful.
It really is. A future where all the pain and suffering is redeemed. Sorrow turns into everlasting joy. A vision that's giving people hope for a long time.
Yeah, and what's cool is how it connects this hope for the future to right now. It brings in this quote from John 14, where Jesus says, I am leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled or afraid.
So even when things are hard, there's this inner peace.
Yeah. Even in the storms, there's something that can keep us going.
It's about having that faith to give us grounding and stability when everything else feels chaotic.
And this sermon ends with a line from Matthew 28 that I really liked. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Simple but powerful. What are your thoughts on that?
It's that reminder that God is always there, a constant presence, unwavering love, something to hold on to when things get tough. It's at the core of the Christian faith, that even in the darkest times, we're not alone.
A beautiful message of hope. So as we wrap up this whole deep dive, what sticks out to you the most about this sermon on suffering? What are you going to take with you?
For me, it's how much it focuses on how suffering can actually change us for the better. It acknowledges the pain, but it points to how we can grow and become more resilient, even find joy in those times. Suffering doesn't have to be meaningless.
I love that. It gives us a sense of power.
Yeah.
We're not just victims. We can choose how we respond to these things, and that shapes how we heal and grow.
Exactly. And I think that's important for everyone. It doesn't matter what you believe. Suffering is universal, but it doesn't have to define who we are. We can bring our pain to something bigger than ourselves, find strength in our community and in things that nourish our souls, be grateful even when things are tough, and believe that even bad times can lead to good things.
I like that. Well said. Well, I think that's about it for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us as we explored this big question. Remember, you're not alone. We hope this conversation has given you some comfort and maybe a little bit of hope and a renewed sense of purpose as you go through life's ups and downs. We'll see you next time.